Welcome back to Pokemon episode summaries. Today, I'll be doing episode 285, Taming of the Shroomish. The episode begins with Ash and the gang walking through Petalburg Woods as usual at this point. However, they soon come out of Petalburg Woods for once, yay! And they soon arrive at a nearby city, instead called Rinchin Town. And Max takes a moment to sniff in the city air, as do Ash, Brock, and May, happy to finally be out of the woods and in a civilized area. After fucking years of walking through the woods, it felt like. The gang was so excited to be in a civilized area as they realized all the things that they could now do. Although, they were kind of in a pickle because they all wanted to do different things. May wanted to go do some window shopping, as did Brock. However, May wanted to go shopping for some cool items and rare shit, while Brock simply just wanted to go for some basic supplies that they would need, such as food and Pokemon medicine. As for Ash, he was immensely hungry, so he wanted to go to a nearby hamburger joint for some lunch, while Max, on the other hand, just wanted to meet some new Pokemon that lived in Rinchin Town, so he wanted to just go touring around the town. Seeing how they wanted to do different things, Ash and the gang decided to split up for the afternoon and promised to meet back up at the Pokemon Center in the middle of the city later. May and Brock would go to the shops together so that they could both get their respective shopping done, and Ash and Max were going to go together to find a place to eat like Ash wanted, specifically the burger joint, while Max could try and look for some city Pokemon on the way. Meanwhile, a whole bunch of construction workers were working on an old-style mansion, with the job of tearing it down because the mansion was so old and no longer in use. The workers found the mansion very creepy, not just because it was old, but because they thought that there were potentially ghosts in the mansion, as the workers talked to each other, mentioning how one of the other workers resigned because they were too scared, also believing that something was in the mansion, likely ghosts. Then, one of the other workers adds that he had happened to see the worker who resigns' resignation letter, and revealed that it stated that the worker had actually spotted something in the mansion and heard it talk and growl. Meanwhile, it was revealed that Team Rocket were also working on this same mansion, having been accepted as construction workers as well, though they were just talking to each other, not even paying attention to what the other workers were saying. Although James and Meowth were having trouble talking to each other, since they couldn't hear each other through the chainsaw that they were operating's noise. Since they couldn't hear each other, though, they both saw an opportunity to insult each other, to get all of the frustrations that they had with each other off their chest, without having to actually admit it to the other person, or Pokemon, I guess. Jessie was getting mad at Meowth and James because they were just trying to talk to each other and weren't working, and ordered them to get to work so that they could get paid. James and Meowth rebutted that if Jessie wanted to get paid so bad, then she should actually help them work as well, instead of just ordering them to work, but claimed that whenever Jessie was asked to work, she always came up with the excuse that she was hungry and was too hungry to work. Jessie denied this, but she unfortunately then became hungry, right as James and Meowth suggested that she help. She said that she was merely just going to go buy something to get some food, and then she would actually help James and Meowth, but then she remembered that she didn't have any money, which was the entire reason why they were working. Anyways, so Jessie, despite her hunger, began working on the mansion with James and Meowth, although she complained about it, wishing that they could just get paid by catching Pikachu instead, leading Meowth to remind Jessie that the main reason why they were working to get money wasn't to get food like she wanted, but it was so that they could acquire Pikachu, as they needed the funds to build a new mech, or capturing device. Now having two things that she wanted to spend the money on, food and Pikachu, she debated which one was more important, as she continued to help James and Meowth, although she was tired as fuck. Meanwhile, May and Brock were now walking through Rinchin Town, with May doing some window shopping, looking at all of the dresses and jewelry. Technically, it was really just May shopping, as Brock wasn't interested in any of this bullshit at all, and he was just being forcibly dragged around by May to all of the antique and accessory shops, even though he protested that he wanted to go and buy some actually useful shit, like supplies, such as food and medicine, and ingredients for Pokemon food. May simply says Brock could wait, as Brock continues to get dragged around, bored as fuck. Meanwhile, as for Ash and Max, they had just arrived at the burger joint and quickly finished their burgers, leading Max to request that Ash now go with him to go find some Pokemon, and Ash agreed. See, this is how you do it, Brock and May. You share evenly between what both of you wanted. Anyways, Ash proposes that they go to look for some Pokemon in some of the town's alleyways, so they go to them, after finding no Pokemon on the main streets. Max wasn't concerned about this, though, as he knew that they would likely find Pokemon in a back alley, because Pokemon were usually found in back alleys in a city. Unfortunately, after searching in the alleyway for a while, they found nothing, so they sadly decided to give up. But then, a Shroomish came out from behind a box in the alleyway, surprising Ash and Max. Meanwhile, back with Brock and May, Brock was finally able to buy all the supplies he needed, and knowing that May would likely try and drag him away due to her boredom at any time, he made sure to stock up as quick as he could and grab as much as he could so that he wouldn't have to risk having to come back and potentially having May drag him off once again to go do some more antique and accessory shopping. So, this left May surprised at the amount of supplies Brock had bought, and questioned why he needed so much, leading Brock to explain how necessary potions, food, and Pokemon food ingredients were, which made May bored. Yeah, that's just how Brock felt when you did your shopping spree, May. Anyways, Brock's huge exposition dump on all these supplies was cut off when they overhear some people talking, and one of the women talking mentioned something called the Green Mansion. And the woman spots May and Brock and asks them if they had heard about the Green Mansion. May simply stated that she hadn't, and tries to walk off with Brock, as she didn't fucking care about a random-ass mansion. However, Brock was intrigued, so he asked to hear about the mansion, wanting to know about its architecture. So, the woman, along with several other citizens, take Brock to this green mansion, which happened to be the same mansion that the construction workers, along with Team Rocket, were working on. May, bored with the mansion, asked what made it so special, and Brock even asked this as well, because he didn't see anything special about its architecture. This leads the citizens to begin talking again, questioning how May and Brock didn't see what was so special about it, or how they truly hadn't heard about how the mansion was cursed. I guess the workers weren't the only ones who thought the mansion was cursed then. May becomes intrigued when she hears that the mansion was cursed, so asks to hear more about the curse, leading the women to explain that the curse was a rumor that was started by a bunch of construction workers who were trying to tear down the mansion. But while they were doing so, they started claiming that the mansion happened to be haunted, and also claimed that they could see some footprints on the floor while they were in there. And immediately after seeing the footprints, several workers would struggle to breathe and then pass out as a result, almost dying, which was therefore resulting in a lot of the workers quitting. Despite Brock initially being the one who wanted to go and see the mansion, he was now scared out of his mind, turning pale upon hearing all of these stories. However, May was now the excited one, admitting that although the mansion sounded dangerous, she really wanted to go check it out and see what was up. Meanwhile, back with Ash and Max, who had found the Pokemon known as Shroomish, Max was very happy to have found it and tried to talk with it, but he noticed that the Shroomish wouldn't talk because it was angry. So, he realized that he could probably cheer Shroomish up if he gave it some Pokemon food. So he asked Ash if he happened to have any, and thankfully, Ash happened to have some that he usually kept for Pikachu in his pocket. So, Max gave it to Shroomish, explaining that Shroomish had no reason to be angry with them, and Max just wanted to be the Shroomish's friend. Shroomish didn't trust Max though, so upon being offered the food, it released a stun spore to defend itself, making Ash and Max reluctantly run away, abandoning the Shroomish so that they wouldn't get paralyzed, running as fast as fucking possible. Meanwhile, back with Brock and May, they were looking at the Green Mansion, with Brock still suggesting that they should just fucking leave and meet up with Ash and Max back at the Pokemon Center, scared as hell. But May explained that she was intrigued by the curse and the prospect of ghosts, so she went up to the entrance gates of the mansion, physically pulling Brock with her and forcing him to join her despite his protests. Eventually, May was pulling Brock so hard that Brock decided to stop protesting despite his fear of scary places, so that he wouldn't get injured anymore by May's forceful dragging. So May entered the mansion with Brock walking behind her. Anyways, back with Ash and Max. Ash was determined, seeing how Max was somewhat distressed at not being able to feed the Shroomish, to try and feed the Shroomish himself. So he took a little bit more of the food and placed it himself, putting it on a napkin from his backpack and putting it in front of the Shroomish, hoping that if Shroomish saw the food on like a safe platter, then it would be more inclined to eat it, and therefore become Max's friend. Unfortunately, Shroomish still hesitated, thinking that the food could be bad or poisonous or some shit, because it didn't trust Ash and Max. So Pikachu got the idea to jump down from Ash's shoulder and take a piece of the food for himself, to show Shroomish that the food was safe to eat, as Pikachu had no bad reaction to it. Judging by Pikachu's reaction, Shroomish assumed that the food was not only safe to eat, but also delicious. So he, still a bit reluctantly, tried the food for himself, and sure enough, Shroomish was happy, as he loved the food, proceeding to eat all the food. Max and Ash then slowly place down some more food, as to not startle the Shroomish, and the Shroomish eats this shit as well, and motions of thanks by jumping up and down. As Max watched the Shroomish eat, he and Ash soon became a bit surprised, realizing that Shroomish should have been inside of a forest, where it normally would be, instead of a city. Ash then realizes that Shroomish may have been in a city because it was separated from its trainer, originally being owned by one, and realized that if Shroomish was lost from its trainer, then they should probably take it to a Pokemon Center so that Nurse Joy could hopefully get in contact with whoever this trainer was. As Ash and Max were talking, Pikachu decided to talk with the Shroomish, asking it why it was in the city, leading the Shroomish to explain that it was in fact abandoned by its trainer, and went over his memories with his old trainer of them having fun in the woods together, but also explains that ever since his trainer had abandoned him, he hadn't gone back into the forest for some reason, staying in the city instead, all alone, with no other trainers ever being able to get up close to it since he was scarred from his previous trainer. But he admitted that he now saw that Ash and Max didn't seem too bad. Pikachu was about to question why Shroomish would have left the forest just because its trainer abandoned it, but before he could get an answer, Max, knowing that he would have to pick up the Shroomish to take it to a Pokemon Center, wanted to make sure that it would be as comfortable as possible and wouldn't lash out towards him, so he took out a handkerchief from his pocket and put it around the Shroomish's head as a sign of respect and friendship. The Shroomish was happy with essentially having a headband on its head, and as a result, this allowed Max to pick up Shroomish so that they could go to the center. While Shroomish was not really wanting to go to the center, as it felt happy with Ash and Max now, and felt as though it could do anything, even without its original trainer, now that it had the headband, really liking it. Back with May and Brock, right after they approached the entrance gates to the mansion, Brock began to get hesitant again, and tried to refuse going in once again, but May managed to convince him, threatening to drag him again. As Brock and May had entered the mansion, Max and Ash had just approached it as well. Since on their way to the Pokemon Center, they had noticed Shroomish staring for a long time at it, seemingly interested in the mansion. They then noticed, though, that the Shroomish had a sad look on its face when looking at the mansion. Suddenly, Ash and Max are startled as the sad Shroomish jumps out of Max's arms and runs away toward the mansion, leading Max and Ash to follow it. For some reason, though, as the Shroomish spots Max and Ash following it, this just makes it even more sad. As Ash and Max were following after the Shroomish, they were spotted by Team Rocket, who were still working on the mansion. However, Jesse and James immediately dropped the log that they were dismantling from the mansion. It's because they wanted to run after Ash and Max to catch Pikachu, believing that they wouldn't need to waste their time making a mech if Pikachu was this close up. However, when they left, this means that Meowth was the only one holding the log, so the weight was too much for him, and it drops on top of him, knocking him out for a bit. So Jesse and James were on their own as they followed after Ash and Max. Eventually, Shroomish makes it to the mansion entrance, with Ash and Max still behind it, and they then follow the Shroomish as it goes inside the mansion through a broken window, with Team Rocket entering the mansion as well. As for May and Brock, who were currently inside the mansion's main hall, Brock was just talking about how much he wanted to leave, while May was teasing him that something scary could pop out at any moment. As if on cue, the Shroomish, who had now also arrived in the main hall, appeared in front of May and Brock, immediately followed by Ash and Max, who greet May and Brock. However, Ash and Max then noticed that the Shroomish had disappeared, and before they could explain why they were at the mansion to May and Brock could explain to Ash and Max why they were there, a man then appeared and ordered them to get out, explaining that there was a demolition going on, and a whole bunch of trees surrounding the mansion were being cut down, along with the mansion itself being destroyed as well. So basically, the man was just like, yo, if you don't want to die, then you should probably just get out of this mansion. The man also introduces himself as Alex, and Ash and Max tried to explain that they were just following a Shroomish into the mansion, and now it had gotten lost, and they needed to find it. Alex, however, severely doubted this, stating that the Shroomish had left Rishin Town many years ago, and hadn't come back, leading Ash and the gang to question why. So Alex tells them the story of why the Shroomish didn't come to Rishin Town anymore. He starts by explaining that when he was a child, the mansion was owned by his grandfather, and a whole bunch of Shroomish also lived there, and they would play with the Shroomish all the time, being their close friends. Adding that he loved the Shroomish so much that he would always beg his parents to stay over at his grandfather's mansion, just so he could see them. But added that he and his grandfather were some of the only people in all of Rishin Town that were fond of the Shroomish, as a lot of the people found the pure amount of Shroomish disturbing, since there were so many Shroomish in the mansion that it kind of stopped a lot of the people from getting to tour the mansion, which was part of the city's tourist industry, because the mansion also happened to act as a lodge. So basically, Alex's grandfather would often let people stay over at his mansion for money, and basically they would have to, it was basically like a super expensive hotel, but then once all the Shroomish were there, a lot of people didn't want to come to the mansion, so eventually the city saw the mansion as useless, since it wasn't drawing in any money for the town, so they suggested demolishing it and putting in some different buildings in exchange that would actually bring in tourism. And they also became so hellbent on getting more tourism that they wanted to cut down all the trees surrounding the mansion as well, like they were doing now, so that there'd be even more room for buildings. But Alex's grandfather, of course, refused this, since if the mansion and the trees around it, which acted as a forest, were destroyed, then the Shroomish would have absolutely nowhere to go. Alex then explains that his grandfather was able to stop the demolition while he was alive, but once his grandfather died of old age, the city jumped at the chance to take down the trees and the mansion to finally get more tourism. Alex explained that he tried to fight for what his grandfather would have wanted, and tried to stop the trees and the mansion from being demolished, even attempting to fix some of the damage that the mansion had endured thanks to the construction workers by rebuilding several parts, but he was caught doing this and was forced to stop. And also explains that because the trees had been cut down, that's why the Shroomish were gone, because since they couldn't stay in either the trees or the mansion, they were forced to flee. I think this basically confirms that the Shroomish that Max had befriended that was abandoned by its trainer, well, yeah, its trainer must have been Alex's grandfather, and once Alex's grandfather died, it must have thought that it was abandoned, and once it saw that the trees were cut down, that was why it couldn't go into what it believed was a forest anymore. Alex then explains that although he didn't want the mansion to be demolished, he did want to see it off if it was going to be demolished, so that's why he was there. He wanted to see it get destroyed. This led May and Brock to bring up the curse of the mansion that they had heard earlier, to ask if that was true. And Alex does corroborate what the women had said, being that there had been construction workers reporting strange things happening to them when they went inside the mansion that was causing a whole bunch of people to quit, and therefore delaying the destruction of the mansion. And explains that that was another reason why he was at the mansion, because he wanted to investigate. Although he admitted that he did doubt the strange occurrences happening in the mansion, wanting to dismiss them as just rumors, but he wanted to make sure. May wanted to investigate as well, wanting to learn more about the curse, but Alex remained adamant that Ash and the gang should get out of the mansion so that they didn't risk hurting themselves, stating that he was willing to take the risk, but he didn't want to risk kids getting hurt. Ash and Max still wanted to go in as well, though, reminding Alex that they truly had saw a Shroomish go into the mansion. Alex still doubted Ash and Max, but then Brock noticed what he recognized as a Shroomish footprint after Ash had looked up Shroomish in the Pokedex and found an image of its footprint. So, when Brock pointed out this Shroomish footprint, Alex actually began to believe what Ash and Max had said, so therefore he let Ash and Max come inside, along with May and Brock, so that they could go and see if there truly was a Shroomish inside the mansion, with Alex leading the way to hopefully prevent Ash, Max, May, and Brock from sustaining any injuries. After a while of searching every room in the goddamn mansion as hard as they could, they still couldn't find the Shroomish, leading Alex to believe that maybe they didn't see a Shroomish after all. As they kept searching, Brock was, of course, getting more and more scared, still terrified of the mansion, and begged everyone to leave with him. Luckily for Brock, Alex was just about to order Ash and the gang out, now not believing the Shroomish story. However, just then, Ash and Max spotted the Shroomish hiding in one of the mansion's old fireplaces, and it was shivering, presumably trying to use the fireplace for heat. Max instantly goes to comfort his friend Shroomish, but the Shroomish seemed more interested in Alex, as the two seemed to recognize each other, confirming that this Shroomish was around when Alex was a little kid, and they shared many memories together, which they reminisced over, greeting each other. The Shroomish, excited to see the man, then calls out for two more Shroomish as they come and join him. They looked cold and frightened, shivering, just as the Shroomish that Max had befriended did, but just like the Shroomish that Max had befriended, when they saw Alex, they immediately became more comfortable, also recognizing him, and they greeted Alex as well, also exchanging memories they had with him, confirming that these Shroomish were the same ones that Alex had thought left all those years ago. The Shroomish that Max had befriended then introduces Pikachu to his two Shroomish friends, stating that Pikachu was its new friend, and sure enough, Pikachu goes over and greets the other two Shroomish, and Pikachu gets along with all the Shroomish very well. Upon recognizing the Shroomish, Alex came to the conclusion, as well as Ash and the gang coming to the same conclusion, that while some Shroomish may have left, there may have actually been a few Shroomish who had kept hiding in the mansion, even though the trees were destroyed, but now they were terrified, since the mansion that they had stayed at all these years was about to be destroyed, and then they would truly be homeless. So that explained why the Shroomish were scared, and why it seemed like they had all vanished, because they had been hiding out in this mansion, knowing that they couldn't reveal themselves, because otherwise the demolition might have took place a little bit sooner. Because if you remember, the entire reason for the demolition was because of the lack of tourism, so maybe the Shroomish thought that if they hid themselves, then people may actually come to the mansion, right? And that way, the mansion wouldn't be destroyed, but now they were just scared that the mansion was going to be destroyed. Although the Shroomish were happy to see Alex, they were of course still terrified to lose their home, so Alex tried to comfort the Shroomish by reminding them of all of their happy times together with his grandfather, referencing several pictures on the wall that he saw of him and his grandfather hanging out with the Shroomish. Ash and the gang listened in on the stories as well, learning about Alex's life with his grandfather and the Shroomish. Unfortunately, this was then interrupted as an explosion through the floor occurred. Alex initially thought that this was the demolition crew, but nope, it was Team Rocket having broken into the mansion. Because although they had followed Ash and the gang inside the mansion, they were on the first floor, and Ash and the gang were now on a further higher up floor where the fireplace was, so Team Rocket decided to make a glorious entrance by exploding the floor of the second floor to enter. Anyways, Team Rocket were there now, and they did their motto, stating their plan to capture Pikachu. To do this, James then sends out his Cacnea, who prickles him and hugs him first, while Jessie sends out her Survivor. Man, it feels weird to not say Arbok and Weezing, huh? But nope, it's Survivor and Cacnea now. Anyways, Cacnea and Survivor both went in to attack and steal Pikachu, but Pikachu tried to hit them first with a quick attack. Before the quick attack could make contact though, Pikachu was startled as the three Shroomish let out a cry. This cry alerted an entire group of Shroomish, the entire group that Alex and his grandfather had befriended, to come out from where they were hiding, in several other fireplaces in the mansion. With all these Shroomish first revealing themselves by crying out the same cry as the other three Shroomish, filling up the entire room, revealing that it wasn't just those three Shroomish that had called the mansion home. No, it was all the Shroomish. Basically, the three Shroomish were angry at Team Rocket for doing more damage to the mansion, and also for trying to take Pikachu, so they took action by calling in the rest of the Shroomish so that they could all go attack Team Rocket, which they did by trying to trample over them, although in the process, they accidentally messed with all the fireplaces, causing them to go out and making the room really cold. But thankfully, this didn't affect the Shroomish so much, because they were already warmed up by trampling Team Rocket and running over them. Team Rocket, in order to protect themselves, ordered their Survivor and Cacnea to use Poison Tail and Pin Missile respectively, and all these attacks hit several of the Shroomish, knocking them away. This just led the Shroomish who were knocked away to retaliate with a Stun Spore attack to get revenge on Team Rocket, as Alex told the Shroomish that were still standing to help out and use a Stun Spore as well. However, Alex of course only wanted the Stun Spore to paralyze Team Rocket, so he led Ash and the gang and himself outside of the mansion so that they could stay in the fresh air, while Team Rocket was left paralyzed by the Stun Spore. While outside, with the Shroomish joining them, Ash and the gang realized that all of the strange occurrences that had been happening in the mansion must have been due to the Shroomish, since people having difficulties breathing and passing out had to have been because of them being paralyzed by the Shroomish's Stun Spore. Brock then added that this also must have explained the footprints that some of the workers had reported seeing, since there were so many. Shroomish, that would obviously leave behind a lot of footprints. Alex knew that the Shroomish were trying to use the Stun Spore to frighten away the workers so that they wouldn't demolish the mansion, although he told them not to do this, claiming that even if they didn't want the mansion to be destroyed, they shouldn't almost kill people with their Stun Spores. The Shroomish then explained to Pikachu, hoping that Pikachu would be able to explain this to Alex, that they would agree not to harm the workers anymore if Alex would agree to reunite with them and officially become their trainer again, in place of his grandfather. Max was able to understand pretty much what the Shroomish were saying. Not what they were actually saying, but just based on their mood and the way that they were speaking, and he was able to discern that the Shroomish wanted to go back to the trees that were originally by the mansion. Basically, the Shroomish wanted Alex to replant all of the trees, and they wanted to live in those trees and hopefully play with Alex while they were there, just like the good old times. This led Alex to apologize to all the Shroomish for not understanding that they had been hiding in the mansion this entire time, and he admitted that he wanted to play with them again as well, to relive his childhood. However, he knew that he couldn't stop the deconstruction of the forest and the deconstruction of the mansion in place of new buildings, explaining to the Shroomish that he didn't have any control. However, Max, Ash, Brock, and May told Alex that he did have a choice. If he didn't want the workers to demolish the mansion or any of the trees, then he should try and stick up for the mansion and the trees. He shouldn't give up. Max was so insistent on having Alex stop the demolition that he grabbed the Shroomish that he had become friends with and says his goodbyes to it and gave it to Alex. Max didn't want to give up his new Shroomish friend, but he knew that if he put the Shroomish that he had become friends with up at Alex's face, Alex might look at the Shroomish and it might convince him to try and stop the construction. Meanwhile, Team Rocket had recovered from the stun spore as it had disappeared from the building, and they were angry at the Shroomish, wanting revenge, so they declared that they were going to capture the Shroomish, not Pikachu. Thankfully for them, they realized that they had somehow made enough money from working as construction workers to be able to build a new mech, and they used this mech to start destroying the mansion to piss off the Shroomish, as well as try to capture them. As bits of the mansion start being destroyed, these parts of the mansion almost hit the Shroomish, causing them to run away in fear. This was just what Team Rocket wanted though, because since the Shroomish were so focused on running forwards, they weren't focused on what was behind them, so Team Rocket was able to come up behind them and scoop them up in their mech's net that was attached to the back of it. Seeing the Shroomish captured, Pikachu goes for a Thunderbolt, desperate to save them, but Team Rocket just laughs, as the mech was also electric-proof. Damn, I don't know how they built the mech so fast. That was electric-proof, but alright. The captured Shroomish, especially the one that Max had befriended, who was also captured, then got extremely angry and knew they had to do something to stop Team Rocket, so the Shroomish that Max had befriended got the idea to use a stun spore and told all of the other Shroomish to follow suit, and with some encouragement from Alex, they all did so. However, Team Rocket had prepared for this and designed their mech to be airtight, so no stun spore could get through, which meant that the stun spore just stayed outside of the mech, and since the Shroomish were so high up in the mech, this meant that the stun spore was spreading high in the sky where they were, and since the stun spore wasn't getting interrupted by anything, it was free to float throughout the sky, heading towards the town, which made Alex and Ash and the gang fear that everyone in the town would then get paralyzed by the stun spore. Thankfully, Brock sent out his fortress and had it use rapid spin to spin the stun spore around so that the effects of the stun spore would not enter the town, and only remain just outside of Team Rocket's mech. Obviously, it didn't affect them still, since their mech was airtight. However, Team Rocket soon began to complain about the heat in the mech due to having no fresh air, and they were struggling to breathe because of this as well. So, Meowth coincidentally opened up the windows, letting in the stun spore, even though Team Rocket didn't know that the stun spore was so close to them. With the stun spore now inside the mech, this causes Team Rocket to become paralyzed, which allowed Alex to instruct all the Shroomish to use Leech Seed to make Team Rocket unable to do anything since their energy would be sapped away, and the Shroomish did this, making Team Rocket pass out from exhaustion, just as Jesse and James yelled at Meowth for opening up the windows, even though they suggested he should. With Team Rocket passed out, May sends out her Torchic and has it use an ember to destroy the net that was holding all the Shroomish, setting it on fire so all the Shroomish could escape and land back on the ground, and then Pikachu sends Team Rocket blasting off, also blowing up their mech with a Thunderbolt. With Team Rocket now dealt with, Ash and the gang and Alex get back to the matter at hand, with Ash and the gang pleading Alex to do something to stop the mansion destruction, asking him if he has made a final decision yet. Being inspired by the Shroomish, and knowing how much they wanted the trees still, Alex had come to a decision. His plan was still to let the mansion be destroyed so that a new building could be created, but then he would simply ask the owners of the new building if he could plant some trees around it so that the Shroomish had a place to go, and he had confidence that the owner of the building would agree, stating that worst case, he would just move in to the Petalburg Woods full-time with Shroomish and make them a new habitat there. In any case, he just wanted to be with his Shroomish. He had realized that. This pleases Ash and the gang as well as the Shroomish, as they say goodbye to the Shroomish and Alex, happy that they've been reunited. The episode then ends with Ash and the gang continuing on their journey to Rustboro City, shaking Alex's hand and wishing Alex and the Shroomish good luck with replanting the trees, leading all of the Shroomish to happily cry out, and thank Torchic for its help with the ember and letting them out of the mech.